How are you marrying the vulnerability pieces and your strengths?
Tell me what it is you plan to do with your one wild and precious life.
There's magic to our community. There's ways that we can inspire.
Hi, you're listening to the QT podcast, where we break down barriers, celebrate successes, and discuss actionable strategies for queer professionals to succeed and lead in the tech ecosystem. My name's Courtney, my pronouns are they, them, and I'm the producer of the QT podcast. Thank you so much for listening. In this episode, we're taking a deep dive into the qualities of leadership through the lens of leaders from the QueerTech community. Drawing from workshops and interviews in this community and at QueerTech events, we'll uncover some essential traits of effective tech leadership today. And we'll also examine how queer lived experiences may act as powerful catalyst for honing these valuable skills. And while leadership is inherently a bit of an intangible subject, because in one situation you may be a leader, and in another situation you may be a follower, there are some clear values that we can indicate insofar as leadership as it pertains to your professional career. One important role that leaders play is creating role models for others to learn from. And I think that this is one of those areas where the personal can become the professional. And this is because lived experience matters. And it's why I want to explore how queer leadership, that is, a leader with a queer lived experience who is authenticity forward, is incredibly important for the growth and empowerment of the vibrant and talented queer professional community working in tech. So whether you're an established leader or aspiring to become one, you know, leadership is not just a role, but a dynamic journey marked by continuous learning and continuous growth. And good leadership skills are not formed in a vacuum. It's a practice that's informed by the successes and, in a lot of ways more importantly, the failures of the leaders around you. It's also formed by the feedback from the most important people to a leader, the talented members of the team that they're working with. So to kick things off, I want to jump into this conversation I had with Clea Arrieta at the QueerTech conference. I just think that some of her insights really set the right tone for our exploration of what makes a great queer leader.
Hi, my name is Clea Arrieta, and my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am a board director with QueerTech, and in my day job, I'm an HR consultant with Bright and Early. I think being queer forces you to have a certain level of resilience and ability to understand your own worth in a society that doesn't necessarily see you as a whole person. Being queer has taught me a way of resilience and understanding of myself that I think I wouldn't have got in the same way if I hadn't came out and gone through the experience of figuring out who my community is. So it's definitely built me to understand who I am as a leader, what I can offer, and what the importance of community is for me. And so I think that's really served me going into spaces or into organizations where I don't always see myself or always feel supported.
Resilience and self-understanding, qualities fostered by Clea's experience as a queer person, are not only central to her leadership style, but also make her highly relatable to folks who might resonate with her experience. And her authenticity shines through. This is important because authenticity helps build trust. Okay, so I'm going to pivot a little bit and start talking about what the tech ecosystem looks like right now. Over the last few months, a shocking, or perhaps not shocking, depending on your perspective, data point has been making the rounds online. Apparently, there are more CEOs named Michael than female CEOs in Canada. And we also know that less than 1% of executive positions in the Canadian tech industry are held by queer people. And this is important because the visibility of queer leaders is impactful for how all queer folks might see how they fit into the tech industry. So that means that achieving a representationally balanced leadership pool is crucial because when leaders share our experiences, it fosters trust and a sense that queer realities are being considered at the leadership level. And some of the findings from the QueerTech research report really underscore this, emphasizing the importance of having queer and BIPOC individuals in leadership roles. Here's a quote: "Not just having a token member in the boardroom." This raises a lot of complex questions about why there's such a disparity in queer leadership representation in tech. Are there really just fewer queer leaders? Or are these queer leaders deeply stealth or closeted? The difference in this representation seems to widen even further when it comes to technical leadership. And on that note, I spoke with Bruno Morel, a CTO who's been searching for more queer technical leaders in Canada. Here's Bruno.
Hello. I'm Bruno Morel. I'm the CTO of Premier Health of America. And so in my role, basically, I am responsible for anything technology. We are a TMX, a publicly traded company, and we are in charge of providing the technology for some of the nurse, educator, physiotherapist agencies. So we send them to the Great White North or sometimes just the residency next door. Yeah, we just make sure to provide them with the best tools and also the best opportunities. That's really what we do. There for sure is somewhere some queer CTO. The challenge I have, and I had a lot of soul searching and also a lot of questioning around myself and my connection and my network, which is they're not visible if they exist, right? Funny story, I started to post on LinkedIn to ask for the CTO to, show up and make themselves visible, queer ones, and I was expecting some, and then none was discovered. And then what I did is that I went on ChatGPT, like asking myself, okay, so maybe ChatGPT can answer me, right? So I asked them, can you name me, the list of CTO in the world, right, that are queer? And then give me a list of CEOs, right? Give me a list of COOs, but no CTO. So I really started to believe that we need to make ourselves more visible, and also we need to raise up the opportunity for other queer executives to get to that level. I think it's essential and very important. And as a gay white CTO, I'm passing, right? So maybe that's the reason why I was able to get into the door. But I'm pretty certain that for any other queer, especially people of color, especially trans people, I'm pretty sure there's obstacles that are probably insurmountable. And we need to change that, I believe.
Removing barriers to leadership for queer people, especially those who are more visibly queer, such as trans people, is important in part because it sets new standards. According to interviews from the QueerTech research report, visibility goes beyond a specific corporation and instead includes the industry's collective culture and how that culture is perceived. The tech industry is one of the most lucrative areas of employment in terms of prestige and compensation, yet a lot of diverse communities have not been willing to apply. Interviewees who spoke to the QT research team had repeatedly mentioned that perceived culture was a barrier. For example, and I'm going to add more quotation marks here, gender imbalance keeps people from choosing that career. They might say, well, the industry doesn't really reflect who I am. There may be just no place for me there, and I should do something else. Which is unfortunate, because queer people add a lot of value to the tech industry. And I think we should hear a little bit more about that value from Dax Dasilva, from an interview that we had at the QueerTech conference.
Hi, I'm Dax Dasilva. Pronouns are he, him. And I'm the founder of Lightspeed Commerce, Inc. and the founder of Age of Union. QueerTech is an important organization for queer leaders, for anybody building in the tech space that identifies as LGBTQ+. It's part of our story. We started Lightspeed as an all-queer team. I think we have an amazing contribution as queer people to bring to this space. There's a magic to our community. There's ways that we can inspire and influence the journey that your company is going to have that's unique. And so don't be shy, be proud. It's important for the queer community, for the business community to share their journeys, to be inspired by one another, to be able to learn from the trials and the victories that we have, to influence and just improve everybody's game and just uplift this community so that we can actually be the leaders that we're meant to be.
So I have two questions. One is, how do we increase the number of queer leaders? And how do we cultivate leadership qualities more broadly? These are complex questions, but I'm eager to dive into the conversations and workshops from QueerTech events to provide some valuable insights. Today, let's explore the barriers to leadership for queer individuals and learn from the experiences of the minority of bold queer leaders who are excelling in their fields. We'll discuss how aspiring leaders can emerge and how those already in leadership positions can enhance their skills to become the most effective leaders possible. First, let's listen to an excerpt from a wonderful workshop led by Lindsay Evans at the QueerTech conference, where they discuss the queer leadership approach and the key attributes of leadership in the workplace.
I'm Lindsay Evans. I use she, her, they interchangeably. I acknowledge that we are getting into queer leadership and intersectional experience as a white, cis, neuroqueer, invisibly disabled, autistic woman who's also a parent, teacher, lifelong student, and call myself a curious disruptor, that I also sit in a lot of privilege. The queer approach to leadership involves recognizing that learning does something to us as lifelong learners, just as leading does something to us as leaders. And in speaking of queer leadership today, I lean very hard personally into the emotional dynamics of the intrinsic personal experience of those across our community, inclusive of myself, to drive the best in the leaders that we see today within ourselves, as well as the leaders that we have across our peers and organizationally and professional heteronormative terms of leadership. What really defines leadership in the workplace, commonly shared as attributes: integrity, resilience, accountability, growth mindset, agility, empathy. Vulnerability and authenticity as leaders are still relatively new concepts, and I happen to work in a D&I space as well as being a tech-adjacent individual. So as we start moving through and embedding into D&I accessibility, into culture work comparatively, the leadership attributes and success factors are really now becoming drivers on what's creating those interpersonal connections. So the softer characteristics, or the emotional side of bringing your whole self to work, is now being taught to leaders and executive and C-suite as the new way to be an empathetic, vulnerable, authentic, bring your best self to work leader. So when you start shifting now and thinking about your strengths, or a few, and what you personally bring to all you do, something that maybe helps you engage openly and honestly, or a strength that you see as a personal success factor and driver. How are you marrying the vulnerability pieces and your strengths? How are these aligning within your own personal leadership? How is a lived experience or being a member of the community, your coming out story, your personal career trajectory? You may or may not have had a peer or representation in a leadership position who happens to be part of the community. You may have out executives in your life who are out to you and social and in business resource and employee resource groups, but not out in the boardroom, as an example. How do these things sit with you, and how are they framing who you are and want to be as a queer leader?
Merging authenticity, vulnerability, and in very substantial ways, empathy are all things that we can learn through experiences of being a bit different from the crowd, of being queer. I want to give a shout out to an interview in the QT podcast first season. If you haven't had a chance to listen to Margie's interview with Naso El Tark, it's in an episode called From the Outside In. Definitely check it out. One takeaway that I had from that episode is that queer people may be seeking connection, and this seeking connection is for a lot of reasons, but perhaps it comes from that shared experience of being on the outside, and that seeking of connection might be an inspiration for that empathy, for that vulnerability, for that authenticity. By trying to connect, we're opening ourselves up to people. There's a great deal of opportunity that comes from leading with one's queer experiences. However, I want to pivot and jump into a workshop led by Jess Malz at the QueerTech conference, because they open up some of the applications for this empathy, for this authenticity, and for this sense of self-understanding. This workshop is all about using those strong qualities to lead by listening and by asking big questions. Here's Jess.
I'm the founder of INBO, and we are a facilitation, team development, and strategic planning agency headquartered in Vancouver. We really live in a culture of telling. You know, if you think of leaders, you think of leadership roles, it's, a lot of it's around power, but I'm here to say that some of the most influential leaders I've ever seen lead with humility, lead by asking questions, lead by listening. And so some of the importance of asking questions as a leader, regardless of where you're at on your leadership journey, doesn't mean that you need to be managing a team. Everyone has leadership regardless of where you are in the organization, or even as a freelancer, external with companies, whatever it is that you're doing. So questions encourage self-reflection. They empower others to take ownership. They foster a caring and empathetic environment. They create opportunities for you and others to learn and grow. Leaders that ask questions are approachable and relatable. They encourage others to actively participate. It creates a sense of engagement. It promotes open communication, diverse perspectives, problem solving, and critical thinking. That's like a pretty good list of good things. So some impactful questions. This was a Google search. My favorite one is Mary Oliver's "Tell me what it is you plan to do with your one wild and precious life." She's a poet. And I heard it when I was in my master's degree, and it's like sometimes a question hits you at the core, and really it's so profound that it sort of rearranges your thinking, your path, your choices. This is something that I have believed, and I also have seen wonderful examples of that. At the core, the true purpose of a leader is to support others in reaching their full potential. So helping others to grow and develop. And I think with pressure in organizations, a lot of people prioritize reaching goals, pleasing people, managing up. But at the core, if you will reach those goals if you're supporting your team who will support you and help you in accomplishing those goals. So for me, the focus needs to be in the right place. The question that I continuously ask myself, not every day, but I would say like every few months, if I feel like I'm getting off track or I'm overwhelmed or my focus has shifted, I always ask myself, like, how am I aligned with my authenticity and purpose? And I remember why I do what I do. And what that leads to for me is all of a sudden, I need to start saying no to things because I've let too many things that don't align with that in. Basically, I have to start getting pretty uncomfortable again. And I go through that of starting to clean things up. So if you think about something that you're asking yourself, how you want to grow as a leader, something that maybe you're challenged by or struggling with. And you can just think about that, reflect on it. If you got a piece of paper, you can jot something down. Hold that with you.
I like what Jess Malz says here because it's a call to action. And frankly, something that hasn't been said yet, but is very important, is that being a leader is hard. But it isn't something that you have to do all alone. That's why at QueerTech, we've started building the QT Leaders track of programming. The QT Leaders program strives to increase queer representation in executive and leadership roles in the tech industry to our vision goal of 5%. At present, queer executives hold less than 1% of these positions in Canada's tech industry. And we know that queer leaders are crucial to our community's progress, offering inspiration and serving as role models for the next generation of queer professionals and possibly igniting that entrepreneurial spirit. You can learn more about QueerTech's mission, QueerTech's community, and QueerTech's events, and the QT Leadership Program at queertech.org. Now I want to step back to the QueerTech conference where I spoke with Simran Kanda, the general manager of MTL New Tech, another wonderful organization that supports the startup ecosystem.
Hi, my name is Simran. My pronouns are she and her. I am leading the organization Montreal New Tech as a general manager. I think more and more leaders and more allies need to show up and be the right example for other people as well and force them to come, because sometimes you think you know everything, but you don't. And coming across people and listening and getting reminded again, it kind of creates a ripple effect in amongst everything. So that's more on a support purpose for me. I think personally, leading a team, it's not an easy task. Being a leader, it's not easy. And every single day, you go through a balance of imposter, I know something, I'm making a mistake to do this. I think conferences like this gives you a big perspective, especially from people who have done it, who have failed, who has been successful. And I think for me, it was today to learn more on how I can be a better ally, a better manager, and a better supporter for people and understanding what do they actually feel, even when they don't feel comfortable enough to come and share. So how can I be there for those silent people as well and people who are not vocal?
Leaders tend to be under a lot of pressure because they're the cornerstone of trust for an organization and also for an industry. But leaders, like Simran shared, make mistakes. And that's why it's important to make connections with other leaders and to learn from those mistakes. Because when trust is broken with leadership, which might be an inevitability. There is fortunately recourse. Like any relationship, there are paths to building and rebuilding trust. Here's another wonderful excerpt from a workshop at the QueerTech conference, and it's all about building and rebuilding trust.
I'm RK Popkin. I'm a director of product management at Google. I love talking to leaders and talking about leadership, organizational culture, and product management. Trust really is everything. Trust is the foundation on which we've built a somewhat civilized society. I trust that when I work, my employer is going to pay me. I trust that paycheck is exchangeable for goods and services. I trust the other drivers on the road to more or less do the things they're allowed to do. And I trust our system of laws and institutions more or less to uphold those rules. If you want to lead other people, as opposed to just being a manager who divides tasks, checks status, etc., you must have people's trust. Now, the definition of leadership that I like to work with is someone who is able to give other people desires they did not have before, right? If you can do that, if you can cause other people to want what you want, to dream about the same thing you're dreaming about, then amazing things can happen in your organization. You won't have to control the details because other people will use their power and capabilities to move towards the same place. But to do that, they have to trust you, and they have to feel that they are trusted by you to be empowered in that way. And so some of the best leaders that I have encountered in my career, they know this. They are empowering leaders. But even those best leaders do things that damage trust because we're all people. Leadership roles are highly stressful, and under pressure, we all break. And what I found is that each of us breaks in a somewhat consistent way over time in terms of what we do that damages the trust other people have placed in us.
These ideas about trust and the framework that follows are the work of Professor Frances Frey and Anne Morris, who are scholars of leadership and also queer.
Trust is a product of three things: empathy, I believe you care about me and my success; logic, I believe you can do it. Your reasoning is sound. I believe you in terms of correct information. And then authenticity. I'm experiencing the real you. This is what people look for in their leaders. And as a leader, you are already doing behaviors that send trust signals in these three categories, and that together hold up trust.
I absolutely love that. And I hope you do too. While there are massive complex barriers to entry for many people in leadership positions, we are seeing some changes because with each new queer leader, new opportunities for growth open up for others. The opportunities for queer and trans people to succeed and lead in their careers in tech. To wrap up this episode, I want to jump into a conversation I had with an incredible queer leader, Jacquie Dinershul. We spoke at the QueerTech conference, and she also led a wonderful leadership workshop there and is a fantastic speaker. Jacquie is a leader at Deloitte and has continued her leadership outside of work by investing in queer community. So here's Jacquie in her own words.
So my name is Jacquie Dinershul. Pronouns are she, her, hers, and I work at Deloitte as head of sales engineering. So this is something that is pretty niche and not a lot of people have heard of. As we like to say, it's the greatest job that no one's heard of. It goes by solutions consultant in many other worlds and places, but because I work for a consultancy firm, we can't quite use that. For many years and in many smaller ways now, I'm working on it. There's been a little internalized, not wanting to really show off my queerness, not wanting to be loud and proud about it, hiding it, going along with being straight passing. And I think for me, it's been an incredible journey to break out of that, to own it, to find the space to own it, to talk to my leads about it, to lead initiatives for queer folks and queer families. You know, I don't think I'd be able to do all of that if I didn't realize how few people are queer, how few people actually can relate to the things that I have faced for years of my life, and how important it was for me to socialize that, to talk about that, to invite others to talk about it. And so I think it's become really interwoven with my career at Deloitte, certainly, with the work that I'm doing there. And of course, in the relationships that I've built there. And there are just so many admirable people and wildly intelligent and beautiful people that I've met because of our queerness. And that's awesome. I am running a Queer Women in Tech in Toronto group, and this includes all women and all non-binary folks as well, in tech specifically. And we gather every 5 to 6 weeks, maybe monthly in some cases. And we've met several times now, and it is somewhat of a partnership with QueerTech. And it was born of a conversation with Naful, you know, where he just posed the question of who is your community of queer women and non-binary folks in tech in Toronto? I sort of looked at him, I was like, oh, nobody. You know, like I have queer friends, not in tech. I have queer women and non-binary folks, not in Toronto. So I was like, let's make this happen. So that's how it was born. And it's just a beautiful, intimate community for now. And we're hoping to expand it, but more so we do want to keep it sort of intimate so that everyone has a voice at the table. And then every several months, perhaps invite family and friends. And then maybe once a year, have sponsored events. That's the dream.
All right, that's it for our episode on leadership. Thank you so much for listening. And as always, if you have any questions or you want to get involved in the conversation, you can reach out to me or visit queertech.org. I want to thank the QueerTech team and our sponsors, the Canadian Media Fund. And tune in next time for a conversation about entrepreneurship and a profile on a lead Canadian indie video game producer.